What will you do with your freedom? Will you fight? One of the great lines from one of the great movies of all time, Braveheart. And it's reflected in perhaps the single most common question I get every day on this channel. What do I do? What do I do in the face of all of this wokeness and corruption and insanity? Well, today I am thrilled to be joined by someone who, for many of you, needs no introduction. He has, for the last 50 years, answered that call, and he's been effectively fighting against all things secular, all things woke, by building not just a parallel economy that we hear so much about, but indeed a parallel civilization, a revitalized Christendom that's growing, it's thriving, and the world is taking notice. Douglas Wilson has authored upwards of 80 books, one of which launched the amazing classical Christian school movement, of which I was a part of for 20 years. All my kids have gone to classical schools. He's a founding member of the Association of Classical Christian Schools, whose membership has grown just in the last few decades from just a handful of schools to now over 500 across the country. He's the founder of New St. Andrews College. He's the pastor of Christ Church of Moscow, Idaho. And he's a founding member of an international denomination known as the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. And in his free time, Doug also founded a Christian publishing house, Canon Press, as well as production companies that have produced faithful Christian movies, educational content, and the like. And that's all before lunch. His latest book, Mere Christendom, lays out his profound vision for a reawakened Christian society all over the world. And that vision is so in demand that the first printing of the book sold out even before it was released. But we're going to show you how you can get your own copy. So, Doug, welcome. It is an honor to have you on this channel.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's a privilege to be with you.
That list of accomplishments, I was going over it today. I mean, it was just it's breathtaking. And I wanted to start by asking you, really, in effect, why? Why weren't you just happy with the privatized therapeutic church? You know, the post-World War II social arrangement of the state shoving the church into away from the public square into the private sphere. You know, nestling the church buildings in between pizzerias on one side and dry cleaners on the other.
Yeah.
Why weren't you happy with just being the pastor of a, First Methodist body and soul aerobic classes on Tuesday nights? Bring your sneaks. Why have you been busy building a world, and why is it so important that others follow suit?
So one of the things that I'm driven by, and where all this started basically, was I got married and we started having kids. And one of the things I learned from, I learned it from probably the great George Gilder first, but civilizations are built by men with families to feed.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. It
He has a
starts
great turn of phrase. Yeah.
And civilizations. And so what happened was I'd done my stint in the Navy, got out, we got married, we started having kids. And when our oldest was a toddler, she was running around the living room or something. And my wife said to me, Doug, I can't see handing her over to someone that we don't know and saying, here she is, teach her about everything.
Right.
Right. And I knew at the time, I knew nothing about Christian education or anything like that, but I did know that I agreed with that. And so I said to Nancy, don't worry, we'll have a Christian school started by the time Becca hits kindergarten. So that now the clock was running. And I got involved in all of this in the first instance as a concerned parent. So I didn't go to college and major in education or education theory or how to start a college, or that wasn't what I was into. I was just into being a dad. And I had felt ripped off by my education. I didn't want my kids to get what I had gotten, or rather had not gotten. And so we just went into the deep end, starting with kindergarten. we started Logos School, Becca's kindergarten year, and then one thing led to another. Everything. If you have Owen Barfield once said about C.S. Lewis that what he thought about everything was contained in what he said about anything.
Wow. Wow.
All right. So
Wow.
that's what worldview thinking is.
Yeah.
Everything is connected, right?
Yeah.
And so if you start thinking Christianly, if you start thinking biblically about topic A,
Yeah.
it's going to slosh over into topic B,
Yeah.
and then topic C, and because this is not something that you can put into a separate container and keep it there. So one thing led to another. What it boiled down to, and so we started. Now it sounds pretty impressive. He started all these things, but you have to understand that this is sort of the crazy guy who goes off and looks into the distance and say, "Why don't we do this?" And then there are other competent
Right.
uh,
Right.
types behind him
Right.
who are kind of worried about him, and, and they're tagging along behind, saying, "Well, let's see if we can help this guy keep him from getting
Yeah.
committed."
Can we finish this other project first? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Well, I remember, I've heard you speak endless times, at ACCS conferences. And one of the things a refrain that I've always taken away from your teaching, which is so profound, is and obvious. It's sort of like a G.K. Chesterton thing, right? What are the apostle of common sense, as they'll call him.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to fight the culture wars, you need a culture.
Right.
You need to be defending a culture.
Right.
And it seems that so many conservatives think that voting Republican is often good enough, but they seem to be missing that. Can you flesh that out for us a little bit?
Yeah. You can't have tank warfare unless you have some tanks.
Yeah.
You can't have naval warfare unless you have ships, and you can't have culture war without a culture.
Right.
Now, what evangelicals and conservative Christians in North America have sought to do is they have sought to fight a culture war. We have enough of a cultural memory that
Mm-hmm.
we know that something is wrong, but we're trying to fight a culture war against a robust secular world with a deracinated evangelical Christian memory echo, and you just can't do it. You need orthodoxy on the ground, that is basically red meat orthodoxy. And
Right.
if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to motivate anyone. You're not going to be able to explain to anyone why we're in the fight. Um, but if you start teaching with authority, as the New Testament says, the way Jesus did, and not as the scribes. If you teach with authority and not as the scribes, and you say, secularism has no answers. They can't answer the questions that would be posed to them by a bright sophomore in a philosophy class. They have no answers. All they can do is shout you down, or cancel you, or call you a white supremacist. Uh, and so many Christians who would ask these questions would then get spooked or scared off at the vicious retaliation. And what has to happen is Christians have to grow a backbone and get in the fray and say, no, I asked the question and you need to answer it. Why should we do what you say? Why should we do what you say?
Right.
I think that the great worldview issues in our cultural clashes today can be reduced to two playground questions. You knew how to ask these questions in third grade. Why and who says?
Right. Right. Right.
Okay. But if they come to me and say you've got to not have a gas stove because of climate change, I want to know why and who says.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
After that, it's come and make me.
That's right. The Charlton Heston out of my cold dead hand. Oh, and who did that recently too, wonderfully and whimsically, was Matt Walsh. And What is a Woman? Just walking
Mhm.
around, just one question that I've heard over and
Yeah.
over again from people.
Yeah.
What's a woman? I could never. couldn't even answer. And then they would just start insulting him.
A woman, a woman is someone who is the only person who has a right to an opinion about abortion because she has a uterus. And a woman is also something that someone without a uterus can become just by declaring.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. Well, it was Jordan Peterson said, the culture wars have changed dramatically. Back in the 90s, legitimately, like you said, just sort of on our Christendom hangovers, so on, it could be a difference of opinion on cultural issues or something. Today, we've got culture wars because one side literally has gone insane. They've gone nuts. They're trying to tell you how great it is that we've got the first black woman on the Supreme Court, and who the heck are you to even define what a woman is? And we got to celebrate both those things. And it's just
right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane. Now, your culture building efforts have gotten national attention from the likes of none other than NBC News, which I enjoyed very much. Ann Thompson, the correspondent there, she traveled to Moscow to see you, to interview you.
She did.
Was it was interesting. I mean, you could tell they tried to make it a hit piece, but it seemed to fail in hitting anything coherent.
Right.
What I found so fascinating is that this NBC reporter Thompson didn't really seem to know what to do with you. It looked like she really wanted to paint you in a corner, but it wasn't working. So this to me is what's so neat. Even in your interviews, you're exemplifying a very clear countercultural approach to handling opposition. So can you share a bit just of that experience, but also just of the strategy you use for dealing with a very hostile secular media, which is reflective of even a more fundamental hostile secular mind?
Right. I call it, and there's a limit. I'll explain the limit to this, but I call it Tom Petty Presbyterianism. Don't back down.
Yeah, there you go. I love
right.
it.
And now, of course, as a Christian, let's say you screw up or you sin, you do something that was really wrong. Of course, you should seek to put it right and seek forgiveness, put it right, but only if God requires it. If
Right.
God requires that you acknowledge your fault, then you acknowledge your fault, and nobody should be demanding you apologize.
Right.
If you owe an apology, you should be volunteering it. You should be pursuing them. But if they want to use the demand for apology, or we want you to feel ashamed of your Christianity, or we want you to feel ashamed of your views on women because of what the Bible says, or we want you to feel ashamed, you have to not budge an inch. And they just have to run into a hard brick wall.
Right.
Because otherwise, as soon as you start saying, my task is to make this unpalatable doctrine to them winsome, right?
Right.
As soon as you accept that as your task, they've got you.
Yeah.
Because all they have to do is keep saying, I don't find that winsome.
Right.
And you keep and then the Christians keep moving left in order to make it more winsome. Is this winsome enough? Nope. Is this winsome enough? Nope. But I think, look, if you're going to reject me as sort of a deplorable, if you're going to, and that's what you're going to think of me regardless, I might as well say what I think.
Right.
And as soon as I say what I think, and they run into real resistance, it's amazing that what real resistance does. Right. And we've seen for a few decades what accommodating, kind of unhappy growling about what they're doing, it doesn't do anything.
Right.
Real resistance means something.
Right.
We have to, in my ACCS talk this last year, I was riffing off Athanasius was famously contra mundum, against the world. We have a little bit more of a challenge. We have to be contra mundum negosum, which is against clown world. And I've said, I have to stop saying things like, now I've seen everything, because
that's right. Or the Babylon Bee is saying it's satire is almost impossible now.
Yeah, it's because it's never true. 3 more clowns come out of the clown car, and I think, how? How
How
do
do
we
they
get
fit
here?
in there? Yeah. How
Yeah,
does this happen? Right.
yeah,
One of my favorite moments, actually, the interview, was when she challenged you on same sex marriage,
right.
I recommend everyone to just Google it and find it. Doug Wilson, NBC News, but it's so good because she pushed you, would same sex marriage be allowed in a Christian, Idaho or whatever
Right.
she was saying, and you pushed back and said, absolutely not. I mean,
Yeah,
and you refer to yourself often as a libertarian. It's not like you're going
right,
into people's bedrooms or anything like that,
right,
but it's not marriage, not
right.
in the classical sense. And then she responded, even though it's the law of the land. And then you responded, you
Uh,
mean like Roe v. Wade? And
yeah,
my daughter played volleyball, and I just saw
uh,
a spike in slow motion there.
yeah.
I
That
mean,
was Yeah, and that's actually something I'm working on now, where back in the day, I'm a Cold War kid. I grew up when the Soviet Union was this
mhm.
monolithic threat to everybody. But one of the few things that the communists had going for them was their eschatology. They had
Yeah,
they had a myth of inexorable uh, the communist way, the dictatorship of the proletariat is going to happen. Okay, it's going to happen,
yeah,
and they believed it, or at least the a bunch of people did. Enough
right,
people did to make it happen. I'm sure there were cynics over there that didn't, but a lot of our Western elites believed it also.
yeah,
That they believed that communism, socialism, collectivism was necessarily the future because they all bought into that eschatology.
right,
And one of my parables of this is when Ronald Reagan ordered the invasion of Grenada in 1983. That punctured the myth of inexorable progress for communism. Right, that was the high watermark. It was that country went communist, and even though it was a teeny tiny island, it was reversed. The revolution was undone,
right,
and then people are thinking that can happen. That you
right.
really that can happen, and within just a few years, the Berlin Wall comes
Yep,
down, the whole thing collapses. I believe that Christians need to recover an understanding that the Christian eschatology of Christ's lordship is a future-oriented um, eschatology with real bite. It's got real force, and the secular eschatology doesn't.
right,
And the only reason it's been going so long is because we've let it.
right, right, right. It's so interesting because in that interview, I think the exchange evidenced a real fear among secular liberals.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons why they're so vicious in
Right,
their response.
right,
It's so interesting. They thought that what was supposed to just die away under their glitter and glam of unfettered progressivism, whether it's Marxist or liberal, whatever, I think they're shocked that it's making a massive comeback, and they don't seem to be able to, they don't have the frames of reference to comprehend it. Religion was supposed to go extinct. And here we
right.
got Rodney Stark over at Baylor saying that the world is seeing the greatest religious renewal it's ever seen. I mean, are you
Right.
getting a sense that secularists are recognizing, whoa, things are not happening the way they're supposed to happen?
Correct. I believe that a lot of what we're seeing, a lot of the viciousness that we're seeing, is sort of we're in the kamikaze pilot phase of the war,
Yeah.
right? Um, this is not a it's not a sign of robust confidence.
Confidence, right?
Right. If you wanted secular liberal Democrats, if you want to see confidence in them, that you'd have to look like 10 years after the Second World War.
Yeah.
Right. Um, they own the world.
Yep.
Oh, we have banished superstition. We are the future. And they really had that kind of mojo at the time,
Right. Right.
right? They felt it. Everybody else felt it. Even Christians acquiesced in ways that they ought not to have. But it was really a thing. But now, how can they know the future when they don't know what a boy is?
Right.
They don't know what a girl is.
Right.
How can they know what the future is?
Brilliant. Yeah, again, going full circle with Jordan Peterson, they've gone insane. There's just
Yep.
no, one side may be wrong, We may be mistaken, but the other side is definitely wrong because it's embraced contradictions.
Yeah,
So
I don't have to spend a lot of time refuting those people who want to make the world safe for four-sided triangles.
right.
they,
Well
it's just
said.
not going to work. And so, if you want sort of the serene self confidence that the liberals used to have, you
Yeah.
look at Fukuyama's essay, "The End of History."
End of history.
Uh,
Yep.
we are the apotheosis of everything,
Yep.
and we have come into our rights as man, capital M man,
Yep.
and there's no more. It's all footnotes after this. Uh,
Yeah,
golly,
nobody even. You're right. I think he published another essay a couple of years later, saying entitled "Second Thoughts" or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Nobody, and then he did a pretty good book on identity politics, recognizing
yeah,
it's all falling apart.
yeah.
Speaking of books and confidence, let's talk about your book, Mere Christendom. So you've
Right.
written. I mean, I think you're at 80 now, Doug. I mean, people talk to me. I did 20. I've done 20 books. They're kind of small books, and I'm like, I know somebody who could 4x that, but.
Well, I tell people that I write books to make the little voices in my head go away.
That's
and,
right.
and,
That's
and the
right.
problem is
And you're
it's not
blogging
working,
constantly, right? Right.
and it's not working.
Yeah, please stop. But tell us why this particular book? What was the passion and the vision behind Mere
Okay,
Christendom?
so I like to think of Christendom 1.0 as being basically the 1,000 years that everybody likes to either skip over or malign as the Dark Ages, right? Um, and you look, if anybody, I mean, I want to yell at people to read a book or
Yeah,
do
right.
something.
Yeah.
First, you don't mean Dark Ages, you mean Ages of Color, don't you? Right? And then you look at that 1,000 years at the cathedrals they were building. You look at the music they were writing. You look at, oh, come on, man, give me a break. So what happened is the sort of the incipient secularism that was present in some strains of Enlightenment thought wanted to skip over all those Christian years and go back to the
Right.
glory that was Athens and the glory that was Rome,
Right.
and they wanted to ignore all these Christian accomplishments. I don't want to ignore them. I want us to honor and respect them and tell the truth about them.
Yeah.
Again, you mentioned Rodney Stark. He's been great, looking at the accomplishments of the medieval period. That said, it's not as though Christians did everything perfectly. There were bugs.
Sure. Yeah.
Christendom 1.0 did some things that I would rather they not have done. Okay, and so and then we've had this secular interlude, and secularism is got the staggers. They're on their last legs, and I want to say as a Christian, look, we need a point of cohesion. We need as a civilization, we need to confess together that Jesus rose from the dead, because I don't think we have any hope otherwise,
Right.
because it's either going to be secularism or radical Islam or Christianity. I think those are the options on the market,
Yep.
and which I address in my book Empires of Dirt. Secularism, radical Islam, or Christianity. But in order for Christianity to come back to the table, we have to recover our confidence. We have to recover an understanding of where we've been, and we have to be willing to correct the mistakes from round one. So, in Christendom 1.0, there were some problems. Let's not do that in Christendom 2.0. Let's not have a 30-year war of religion,
Right.
right?
Right.
Over whether you baptize with heads upstream or heads downstream. Let's let's not let's not do that. Well, C.S. Lewis wrote the famous book Mere Christianity, riffing off of a phrase by the great Puritan Richard Baxter,
Mm.
who coined that phrase "mere Christianity," and that's different from lowest common denominator Christianity. Where in North America, for evangelicals at least, the idea has been, what's the minimum of truth that we
Yeah, kind
can
of the
confess?
privatized version. Yeah.
What's the minimum we can affirm and still go to heaven? And that's, I think that's just a wrong-headed way to think about it. Mere Christianity, as Lewis explains in illustration of the household is he wants to get people into the house and into the hallway, but he says it's in the rooms where you take your meals and you live your life, and the rooms are where the churches, the church community, koinonia fellowship, all that happens in the house, and you can't live effectively by living a Spartan minimalist existence there. You want to embrace what you believe to be the truth of God and the scriptures and everything. Now, in Mere Christendom, I ask what happens if we take this approach and apply it to nations and tribes and countries and states, right?
Yeah.
Um, I believe that the genetic DNA of America is evangelical and Protestant, even though we're an apostate nation, but a lot of the traditions and um, assumptions and that sort of thing are there, which is why Stephen Wolfe, in his book The Case for Christian Nationalism, thinks that North America, it would have to be some sort of pan-Protestant thing that wouldn't exclude Catholics or Orthodox, but basically the ethos of the thing would be
Right.
a Protestant ethos, right?
Right.
Um, and and this leads to the next thing. Someone says, "Ah, there you go. You're making it sectarian." Well, and that's the thing that everybody's afraid of. That's the thing that spooks everybody.
Because
As soon
they're thinking the 30 Years War and all that. Yeah.
Right. They think you're going to start executing people, burning witches and
Yeah. Yeah.
and that sort of thing. No, those are the things that I think that we should have examined the notes and learned uh, in Christendom 1.0 that those sorts of things are not sustainable, and they provide fodder to the enemy for rejecting everything that Christ does provide for us,
Right. Right.
which is a reason for living and a code to live by.
Right.
Right, right,
Right.
right. So I don't want to reboot religious persecutions, right?
Well,
But
of course not.
but
Yeah.
when people but this is the thing, and this is really important because when I'm talking with a fellow Christian and they reject, I'm nervous about Christian nationalism because I don't want anybody to be flogging Baptists, or
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Well, I would say, okay, now let's say that your nightmare comes true, and let's say guys like me establish a Christian state, and let's say that we start flogging Baptists. Now, in your view, would Jesus like that or not like that?
Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
he would say, well, of course, Jesus doesn't like that. And I'd say, okay, I agree. He doesn't like that. So you're saying that we should conform our public policy to what Jesus likes?
Right. Wow. There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, yeah, I guess so. And I say, well, welcome to Christian nationalism.
Yeah. Yeah. I
See,
love it.
your objection, what their objection is not to Christians serving as magistrates acting like Christians.
Yeah.
What they object to is Christian magistrates in that position acting like pagans,
Right. Right.
right?
Right. Right.
So
Brilliant.
to come at this another way, Luther famously said, I've not been able to track this down, but Luther is purported to have said that he'd rather be governed by a wise Turk than a foolish Christian. Okay,
Right. Yes. I've heard that.
okay, this is Luther after a couple of beers, and
That's right.
and I would say, okay, but realize that there are four options here, not
Hmm.
just two, because you could be governed by a foolish Turk, right?
Hmm.
Instead of a wise Christian, which is what we're dealing with now.
Right. Right.
Okay,
Right.
we're being governed by the foolish Turks. We're
Exactly.
being governed by the Turks who've lost their minds.
And
So
who have their own forms of excommunication, right? Cancel
right.
culture and the like. It's a religion in that sense. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, it's true, I would rather be governed by a Turk who acts like a Christian than by a Christian who acts like a Turk.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right.
But listen, why is everybody spooked at the
Right.
prospect of being governed by Christians who act like Christians?
Right. Right.
Who
Exactly.
embody the spirit of Christ, who believe that justice should be colorblind, that justice should not make a distinction between rich and poor, that justice should be grounded in scripture and not
Yeah.
in our changing whims.
Yeah.
our fads.
Right. Right. And it's so fascinating too, because scholars are talking today about refeudalization happening. It's the term they
Well,
use to point out how we have now so much power and wealth accumulating in the hands of very few. At the same time, we have a new kind of religious fundamentalism, not coming from a clerical class, but rather a clerisy class, a university, quote, educated,
yeah,
so we'd say indoctrinated class that are enforcing this dogmatic fundamentalism down everyone's throat that's supposed to make us morally weak, so we comply with the billionaires and the bureaucrats who've teamed up. So you've got this new
yeah,
caste system structured very much like the medieval era. In Europe, they call it neo-medievalism with the European Union there. And when I was out in Verona, I mean, when you heard people like Giorgia Meloni of Italy speaking out there, Matteo Salvini, representatives of Viktor Orban in Hungary, they had a contingent from the Law and Justice Party in Poland that formally declared
yeah,
Jesus' lordship over their nation and the like.
yeah,
You saw this Christian nationalist vision internationally, and you're like, this is really happening. I mean,
right.
this isn't theory or anything like that. So it's again to kind of tie the loop in. You could see why NBC News is starting to panic a little bit now. Of course, they're trying to turn Christian nationalism into a boogeyman and the like.
Right.
But it seems too it's um it's almost like baked in the cake, as it were. I mean, Eric Kaufman of the University of London talking about demographics and how secular liberals are basically, they're basically they've stopped having kids.
Yeah,
They're way below the 2.1 replacement level.
yeah, exactly.
All as conservative Christians are having more kids than ever when you take into consideration the infant mortality rates being reversed. So
Yeah.
if demographics is destiny, sounds like
Right.
covenant theology, doesn't it? But if demographics is destiny, it seems like something akin to a kind of Christian nationalism that you're arguing for is almost inevitable. It's like baked into the demographic cake.
Yeah, very, very much so. And we like to joke about it, but in our church, we have hundreds of kids, and and if you were to get down on one knee and look across the room, there's a whole another population down there,
Mm,
and we love our kids, and
yeah.
it's not unusual for us in our communities to have families with 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, and that's sort of mainstream.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and but out in the secular world, people are having 1.2 children so that they can have something to put in daycare.
Right.
Um, and look, basically, you can see in your attitude toward children that they have given up on their eschatology,
Right.
right? And they've shifted over, and the plan's not working because they thought, well, we can avoid the hassle of kids, and we'll just let the evangelicals over there be our breeders.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and that worked as long as Christians were putting their kids in the government school system, right? We'll breed them for you, and then we'll send them off to you to be educated
Right.
and turned against us.
Right.
But now we're still having those kids, and we're educating them ourselves.
Right.
We're within I think of maybe another 10 years or so of the government school system here in Moscow, our small town, dipping below 50%.
In the technically the minority. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that before the Lord calls me home, that I will be able to see the day when the majority of kids in our town are
Wow.
receiving a Christian education.
Wow.
And we're within shouting distance of that
Yeah.
now. It's about 35% of the kids
Incredible.
now.
Incredible. Incredible. And then, yeah, homeschooling shot up even 700% in some places during the whole COVID
Yeah.
insanity. And that seems to be, ironically, one of the reasons why they've lost their confidence is their environmental apocalypticism. That's
Yeah.
just now, if you have kids, you're actually destroying the environment and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's
Dooming the planet.
dooming the planet and the like. Doug, what advice would you give to Christians and communities that find themselves in more, for lack of better terms, just really dense secular areas of the country? what kind of advice would you give to them in the face of just this constant woke insanity that they're dealing with?
I would say take a page from the lesson that Elijah learned when he said, "I'm the only one left, and they're trying to kill me." Um, and God says to him, and Paul reminds us that God said to him, "Take heart. There are 7,000 that have not bowed the knee to Baal.
Right.
I've reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal." And this, I'm going to point to an encouraging sort of thing, because not that I'm endorsing everything about this, but it was encouraging nonetheless. Where a middle school in Massachusetts, where they were doing a Pride Day thing,
Oh yeah.
and the
I
and the
reported on it.
and the students revolted
Yeah.
and started saying their pronouns were USA, and they tore and you think, okay, the first thing is Massachusetts, you know,
Right. Exactly.
right?
Right.
So you have to understand that the secularists are getting to the point where they've been poking the bear with a short stick for a number of years now, and they're starting to get a reaction that I think they didn't count on. I
Right.
think they didn't plan on.
Right.
And so for parents in Massachusetts or Connecticut or any of those blue areas that
Yeah.
are,
Deep blue.
you know, Europe without castles, um, when you have places like that, you need to understand that there are hundreds and thousands of
Yeah.
people who share your sentiments and who live near you,
Right.
and you need to start praying that God would sustain them, encourage them, and enable you to meet them,
Right.
network with them.
Right.
So I would encourage Christians in deep blue areas to move networking to the top of their prayer list.
Yeah.
I want to meet people who think and pray and worship the way I do. They're there.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. We're going to have a link down below to get the book, but where can people find all of your books, read more about you and the like? Where can they avail
Okay.
themselves daily of your wisdom?
Yeah, yeah. If you're up for it, yeah. We arrange things. My blog is Blog and Mablog is the name of it, and
Okay.
the address is all lowercase dougwills.com.
Okay.
So dougwills.com, and if you go to that blog site, on the front page, on the landing page, there's a portal or a link to pretty much everything I'm involved in. New St. Andrews College, you can get there. ACCS, you can get there from the front page. Canon Press, you can get there, and so forth. So if you go to my blog, that's the intersection where you can, the things you will see, as Dr. Seuss might have put it.
No, we have to ban him too. So.
Yeah.
Everyone, click on that link below. Get Doug's brand new book, Mere Christendom. It is amazing. Like I said, it already sold out in its first printing. Go ahead. It's already going through a second printing. Click, get your book. It is wonderful. Get so many of his books. I mean, it's a library, a treasure trove of deep theology, culture war fighting, you name it. Be encouraged in all kinds of ways in which Doug has been active in revitalizing Christian civilization in a way that's just so absolutely wonderful. Douglas Wilson, I know you're a humble fellow, so I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, but you are a hero to more than you can imagine, and most especially to me. It's been an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it.